Hi, Carl.
Hi there, Heidi.
How we doing?
Doing great today. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome to Pappy Machinery's first night of our virtual optimization clinic.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Carl Laux, and I'm a product specialist for Papé Machinery. Tonight, we're going to cover the Windrower. But first thing I want to mention is typically, folks, we do a face-to-face clinic, and we do that either at the Albany Fairgrounds or the Salem Fairgrounds. But this year, we decided to do a virtual clinic, which is something new to us. But we really want to be able to get this information out to you folks because we feel it's very important before harvest starts that you all learn and know how to optimize your equipment before the season begins.
Nice. Well, let's just talk a little bit about what you can expect this evening.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the W260 Air platform, the Legacy Air, and that machine is a specialty crop machine. This video was recorded here in the Willamette Valley, and it's focused on the specialty machines. But I do want to add with you folks that we have some folks on here tonight from the Columbia Basin who have purchased these machines up there. So we want to welcome them as well, and we're going to introduce our panelists here.
Yes, tonight we're going to be joined by a couple of panelists that will be calling in from their locations. Why don't you go ahead and introduce them, Carl?
You bet. So on the far left there, we've got Shane Stewart. Shane Stewart comes to us with a lot of technical knowledge. Shane's been involved in this air header project from the very beginning. And Shane is a customer service advisor for the Tangent region. Aaron Hyatt also has a very in-depth technical background with this machine as well and has a lot of experience with it in the field. And Aaron is a territory manager out of our North Willamette Valley region in North Marion County. And then over on the far right, you've got Will Pardue. Will Pardue is our product integrated solution specialist. And Will's also got a pretty extensive background in the technology piece that we have in this W260 Windrow. And then in the middle there, you've got myself, Carl Laux, and I've been involved in this Windrower for, well, basically 17 years now, since the beginning of this platform. So there's our panelists, and they'll be able to answer some questions when we're finished with this video. And by all means, please type those questions in for us.
So speaking of questions, we want to let you know there are two ways that you can communicate with us. One is the chat button, and second is the Q&A, which what you will do to find the Q&A section is to click on the three dots that most of you have in your menu bar. When you click on those three dots, it will open up another panel, and there will be a Q&A icon. If you just click on that icon, it will immediately bring up your questions, the question Q&A panel. You can type it in the text box and go from there. So with that, do we want to get the video started, Carl?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start the video. And again, I encourage you, there's a lot of information in here, folks. So as you're listening and watching the video, please type those questions in so we can help you answer them. Thank you.
Right, and just real quick, it's about 30 minutes. So know that there's a lot of good stuff in there, and we will see you as soon as the video is done. Thank you.
Welcome to Papé Machinery's 2020 Windrower Clinic. I'm Shane Stewart, the Customer Support Representative for the South Willamette Valley.
And I'm Aaron Hyatt, Territory Manager in the North Willamette Valley.
And so we're going to start out with the features and benefits, which will be inside the cab up here in the Windrower. All right, so we're going to start out talking about the multifunction handle here that controls the platform. Getting the Windrower warmed up here so we can get ready to go. I want to start out with this. A lot of people generally use the up and down button here to raise and lower their platform, and the side to side adjust your tilts it forward or back, which you have a gauge on the front of the platform. But what I'd really like to point out here is very few people use the 1 and 2 feature up here and the auto steer. So if they are using auto steer and they're using the up and down, they would have to drop the platform and then push the auto steer to lock in the auto steer while they're running it. If you use the 1 and 2 buttons here, it's just a one push click for the function. At the end of the row, when you're going to raise the platform, you would hit 1, and to dive into it, you'd hit 2. So I'm going to show you here. It will drop the platform down, all the way down where it belongs, and it locks on auto steer. It's a one click function. You hit that, platform goes down, auto steer locks on, and you're going. You get to the end of the row and you just hit 1. It's going to pick the platform all the way up, and then you can make your turn and start again. If you use the 4-way function to raise and lower it, you can hit down all the way. If you only hit down to the first click, it stops. If you hit all the way down, it drops your platform down. But when you raise, you would have to hold the button up to raise it all the way up. You can't just hit the button and have it raise all the way up. So that's why the 1 and 2 features are awfully nice there. Your float adjustment is this 4-way switch over here. If you kick it to the side over on your screen here, you notice it brings up your float pressures. You can highlight which side, if you want to do the float even on both sides because you've already adjusted it, you can put it in the center there and then push up or down to increase or decrease the pressure on the float with these numbers here. When you adjust your float, you want roughly between 120 to 150 pounds of lift on each corner of that platform. So that pretty much concludes the multifunction handle. Now we're going to move into the platform monitor up here. You have multiple features up here. It's very user-friendly. The up and down button, you have an OK, and then the swap, which you can swap these speeds of your banks of drums side to side with the swap when you're running. But if you got a little box up here around the run, if you push down, it'll move you down. You got menu, speed, fold, lights, pump. So we're going to drop down to speed. This is how you change the two sides of your platform, the speeds independently. You move down to speed, you would hit OK. It'll highlight the left bank. So you would go up or down to change that feature. We'll just bring it down to say 8 or 900. And if you read here, it tells you once you get your desired speed, you hold OK for 2 seconds. It will save the setting. It moves to the right bank. Again, you adjust that up or down wherever you'd like. Hold OK for a couple seconds. It saves it, and now those are your speeds. You can set them the same or differentiate them. You have 50 RPM increments for your speed settings. Once you get that set, then we can drop down. The next one down is fold. That's for your knockdown bar out there. You would hit OK. Now you press up, which is already up, so I'll push down. You just hold down and it's going to fold the knockdown bar down. I can stop and go. I'm just going to put it back up for this presentation. And then you would hit OK once you're done. The lights are the work lights on the platform that are up front there. So if you're at night, you can turn them on if you need to get some light in there to work on the platform. And then your pump, which is right there. You can go into that and you can adjust your pump for manual mode, or you can change it to platform lower spray on, which would be when the platform's down in the cutting mode to put your spray on. Some people utilize that for applicating sprays and whatnot. Your other option is platform raise. It's the most used. You have 3 settings for that you can utilize. Right now it's on automatic 15 seconds, which means anytime you raise the platform to turn around and there's no material in it, it will kick on your solution for 15 seconds. I can adjust that down to 10 seconds or even 5 seconds. So you have 3 settings there, 5, 10, or 15 seconds, that it'll run the solution on your cutter bar to try and keep the honeydew wiped off of it. and then once you get to where you want, you just hit OK, and then it goes back to your, I'm sorry, I didn't hold OK for 2 seconds. There, now it's safe. So that's pretty much the usable features on that. There is a timer setting down here where you can actually set a timer on that solution pump when the machine sits overnight. You can have this pump kick on and hose that cutter bar down with the solution while it's sitting overnight, just to soften the honeydew, so when you go out to utilize it, it'll wipe it off when you first begin. But there's a load bar up here for the engine. Of course, there's no load on it right now because we're not running any material or any load on the engine. And then there's a load bar on this side of this screen. This is for the drums, the load that the drums are feeling on the platform, and we'll talk about that a little later when we come back up here and talk about the running operation of it and how to get it dialed in. For airflow, there's 4 things that affect the airflow on this platform that I didn't go over in the cab. That is the knives. You have 2 different sets of knives. You have a high and low lift knife that will increase or decrease lift and airflow. You have the accelerators, which are these. Aaron's going to go over that. You can add or remove accelerators, and that increases lift and airflow as well. The air holes, there's 2 bolts here that you can loosen the nuts. You can slide this open or close to adjust the airflow. It is pulling air in this hole. And then the cutter bar and drum speed all affect airflow. So those are the 4 things. This whole platform runs on airflow, moving the material without shattering the seed.
On our hat here, the knives mount on both ends, and those need to be in good shape. By good shape, I mean corners not rounded off, no nicks, no broken edges. That's important so that we have good airflow created by the ramp on the knife, and also we have the ability to cut cleanly. The next thing that affects the airflow and is a maintenance item is our accelerators. These accelerators have an arrow right here to help indicate where and when they should be changed. When this leading edge is worn down to the tip of the arrow, it's time to replace these. The next thing we have on the cutter bar is nut protectors. These go over every nut right here where the knives, where the knives mount. So one tip for you guys on these is they don't need to be thrown away when the first edge wears out. They could be switched over to the other side of the cutter bar and worn one more time. So that'll decrease your expenditures on these by 50% if you follow that rule. UHMW panels, I don't have an example here today, but the small drum, first drum on each end of the machine, has 4 UHMW panels on it. Those keep debris out of the drive line that drives the cutter bar that sits in here. You need to clean inside of this periodically. To do so, all 4 UHMW pieces need to be removed and all of the debris removed from in here. The debris does have a tendency to wedge itself in the corners of the angle iron here. It's important to knock that out as well so everything's running as balanced as possible. On top of this, we have a crop ring to help keep things clean and smooth and flow through and not get inside of there. Cutter bar guards. It's important that these are intact. They're a ground engaging tool, so they take quite a bit of abuse. The wear you will see on them is on this edge here. And when these wear to a knife point, it's time to replace the guards. If they break or crack out, it's good to replace them as well. You can continue to run for the night like that. But on top here, we have 8 Lovejoy couplers, 4 on each side, and they couple this motor to the shaft that runs the drum. To access those, you need to pull this panel and one panel back here. You can look inside, look up at the top and see the Lovejoy coupler, the orange and black piece there. Make sure it's tight and that the rubber is intact. On the back of the machine, we have our water tank. So typically guys put 50 gallons of water, 6 ounces of a surfactant, and 12 ounces of rubbing alcohol in the mixture to keep the honeydew down on your bar. If you're not going to run your water system, it's still a good idea to have 50 gallons of water in here just for some ballast to help the ride. I'd highly recommend keeping it full.
Before you go out into the field for the season, you want to run and operate all the features of the platform to make sure everything's operating properly, right? And so you'd start with your cutter bar, engage it, crank it up to full speed, drop it down to low speed, make sure that function is working properly, and listen to it. You know, make sure everything sounds fine with the cutter bar. Same on the drums. You want to dial your drums up to the highest speed, drop them down to the lowest speed, make sure they're functioning properly. There's solenoids that actuate that, and sometimes they can get sticky in the valves after sitting for 9 months. And then the platform, as far as just raising and lowering the platform, make sure the tilt function works, your knockdown bar, operate it, fold it in and out. These are just good things to make sure everything's in working operation before you head out to the field. And your wet kit as well. All right, next I think we're gonna run back into the cab, and then we'll go over some running adjustments while you're diving into the field and getting her dialed in. Okay, again, I think I showed you this in the beginning, but when you first fire up the machine, this screen for the platform control comes up to your pre-checks, the items daily. You have to hit OK button, and then it says while operating, of course, the safety stuff, and then it'll go to the run feature. So we're gonna start with the cutter bar. Obviously, you get out in the field, you're gonna engage your cutter bar. It's suggested to engage and disengage your platform at low RPMs. It's easier on the check valve that's on the drive motor for that cutter bar. So we'll engage the cutter bar, get it rolling, and then you'll ramp up the RPMs. I'm just gonna ramp them up temporarily so we can hear. I'm gonna drop the RPMs back down. It's gonna be a little hard to hear with the RPMs up. But once you fire up the platform, get the cutter bar and drums going, of course, generally in heavier crops, harder to cut crops like perennial, fescues, K31, even orchard grass, there's a lot of material. We run the cutter bar at 3,000 RPM, which is the highest RPM it'll run. In some of your lighter crops, meadow foam, some light clovers, you're gonna want to drop your cutter bar speed down to reduce the airflow so it's not blowing the windrow around. So when you're running the cutter bar, this knob here, the one closest to the back, by dialing it clockwise increases your cutter bar speed. Clear up to 3,000 is as high as it'll go. And then counterclockwise, and it's in 10 RPM increments, counterclockwise drops it down. So once you get your cutter bar speed set, you start, and generally I'll start with my drums up here. I'm gonna go ahead and bring those down here so I can adjust my speeds, but generally I will, I will adjust them between 11 and 1200 RPM to start with. We'll get over here and do this one also. Get it up here and hit OK. Okay, I'll start out around between 1,000 and 1,200 RPM. Dive into the crop, depending on what the crop load is. Once you get going, like I said, the heavier crops, we're going to be at 3,000 RPM on the cutter bar. Your travel speed is going to be dictated by this load bar up here on this screen. So it's going to generally run up here in the yellow. If you're bumping the red, you're going to have to slow down the speed with your control handle here. you're gonna have to slow down your speed because you don't want to be running in the red. You're gonna start crashing knives. Once you got your speed set and you're cruising along, say 10, 12, 8, whatever speed you decide to go, then you adjust your drum speed. And I can do that with this dial right here. This one adjusts these speeds, both banks of drums, right and left, together simultaneously. So once I get that set, the differential between the two banks in here, I just dial this up on the run. I can change those in 50 RPM increments. What you're looking for is, and I'll dial it up or down 1 to 200 RPM increments, and watch this load bar. You want this load bar to be as low as possible. The lowest you can get this load bar to run is optimum for the speed on those drums. That means you have the minimal amount of contact and seed shatter and movement going on inside the drums. So once you do that, you get your drums dialed in. You can mess with your cutter bar speed. If you're running in the green, totally in the green on the engine load bar, you can definitely drop down your cutter bar speed to see if that helps you not lift the crop so much. If it's a lighter crop, you definitely want to drop your cutter bar speed down. And then the platform tilt on the fly. So you got this going. When you dive in and you're starting to cut, I use my mirrors for the tilt to see if I'm getting a clean cut on the product. You can tell, if it's leaving it shaggy or you're skipping over some stuff, then you'll want to tilt the front of the platform down a little more so you're cutting a little tighter. You can hear if you're hitting dirt, if you're cutting too deep, you can hear it and you can see it in your mirrors, and then obviously you want to tilt the platform back slightly, and so you're not digging into the dirt. And then the other thing, and we can show you when we're down below, the skid shoes play an important part of this platform being set properly. We start out normally with them in the middle hole, so they're down 2 holes. They tend to cut the best there, at least when we do demos. That's normally where we'll run them. So now we're going to step back out of the cab, go down outside, and then Aaron's going to go over the daily and weekly maintenance with you, and then I'll go over the issues and solutions after that. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go over some daily checks for maintenance. It's some of it's a little bit redundant, but just need to go over it. Check the knives every single day. As I mentioned, solution levels and having water in the tank, very important to address that every single morning or evening when you start. Lovejoy couplers, I can't emphasize that enough. They're good, they're durable, they should stay in place, but they take such a heavy load that they will wear. They're a wear item, and not checking one of those and spending the 15 minutes it takes to have everything in order could cost you a couple hours of cutting at nighttime.
Can I interject there, Aaron? So another thing on the Lovejoy couplers, not only do they wear, but at times with load, they will start coming apart, sliding apart. There's a rubber cushion in between the 2 metal couplers. So you want to look and make sure those 2 couplers are holding that rubber coupler in the center tight, not coming apart.
Yeah, good point. And these are a part that are inexpensive and stocked at all of our locations. I'd recommend having those in your toolbox at all times, along with your knives and nuts and bolts. Let's move up to the front of the cutter bar here to go over a couple of things. Blowing out the upper and lower drum bearings. It's really important that this happens to prevent fire, to keep the machine running at its optimum performance. And where you can see buildup in these drums is right up here. Above this drum, you will get debris inside of that panel. And if you can zoom in on this panel, one really important thing to know is when you've taken this off to clean, you have a small gap here. You should not be able to fit your finger in that. And this is slotted for adjustment. You want to get it as close to this prop ring that we talked about earlier as possible without it touching. On this drum, you have top and bottom to clean. And same thing back here. You have a top area where you could get debris, and on the underneath you have a bearing that's exposed. We'll go over some other stuff on that bearing later. Another very important thing is keeping the honeydew buildup off of the machine. Where the machine engages the ground, it'll get built up, but it'll also scuff off. It's important to get the bottom of this cutter bar as clean as possible to keep it moving smoothly through your crop. You'll also have buildup all over the top of the bar. Your water system helps with that, but that doesn't mean you don't have to clean that thing. You need to make sure that that's clean when you start every time. On the weekly checklist, we have the accelerators that we talked about earlier, and you can see them in here. Those need to be checked at least weekly. Nut covers as well that we discussed that sit on top of those accelerators. The cutter bar guards, that's a once a week check. The UHMW panels that belong on this drum right here should be checked once a week. The things you're checking for are bulging or the edges being worn out to the point where this corner starts to be exposed. If this corner of the steel is exposed, it's time to replace them.
Hey, while you're there, I wanted to point out, maybe I missed this, but so if you do run UHMW panels on these outer drums, you're gonna have 3 black ones, 1 green one. The green one goes in front of the spot where the grease zerks are. So obviously you want to take all the panels off. This is nice, we're blowing stuff around. You want to take all the panels off, again, like Aaron said, to clean all the debris out. We've had people that just take the green one off, clean that debris out just so they can grease it and put it back on. It will take out these quill bearings quickly if that's what you do. So we suggest if you run the panels, you take all 4 off, you clean all the debris out. When you put them back on, the green one goes in front of the grease zerk, so you know where the grease zerk's at. If you can get to the grease zerk without disturbing any of the debris, if you have very little buildup in there, you can just grease it and put the panel back on. But if any debris comes out, then you need to take them all off, clean it all out, because you need it to stay balanced. Thank you.
All right, and on that note, there's the grease zerk there that we need to get taken care of. And then there's a couple more very important ones at the back of the machine. On the rear axles, you have 2 grease points for the upper and the lower part of your spindle. Those need to be greased at least weekly.
The thing to be cautious about is on these 2 drums, they do not have a lower bearing. They're suspended. Both bearings are above the drum, so you can bend this shaft if you have a tool with a long bar and you got a big wad of grass back there and you reef it through, you can bend the shaft. So something to be cautious about. Another deal is accelerator location. So what we've found in the heavier materials, fescues, orchard grass, perennial ryegrass, if you are wrapping in these 2 spots here, generally I've found that it's because we have an accelerator on one of these 2 discs, these outer discs, and they are pitching the material, the heavy material is wanting to go in between those drums and cause it to wrap. So I would start with removing accelerators if you have them on these outer 2 discs on both sides. And that, again, that's generally during the heavier crops or hard cutting crops like perennial or fescue. Drum bearing wear.
Go into that a little bit. Okay. So in the past, we've had some drum bearing wear on the shafts that he was just describing. We have bearings on the top or top and bottom. There was an update, I believe, that came out in 2016 that increased the contact surface of the bearing to increase longevity and load capacity. If you have any doubt in your mind whether your machine's been updated or not, contact your local CSA or territory manager to find out, and we'll get you taken care of on that.
These right here are kind of a flap that mounts underneath the forming drum right here. We do have issues in some conditions where these lower bearings, because they're down in the material all the time, on the tall drum in here and the forming drum, the lower bearings tend to get a lot of debris in them, right? Especially if it's nasty and wet and mucky. These panels, we've made them, there's 2 bolts on the back of the cutter bar right underneath this forming drum that is pre-drilled. You can just pop the nuts off, slide this in, it fits right underneath that forming drum, kind of like a mud flap or a skid shoe, just to keep the material out of that lower bearing. And it's made a huge difference. We've had machines come in to our shop after they've run these and didn't have a bit of debris in that lower bearing. So they definitely make a big difference.
So the third thing I wanted to talk about is in the past we've had some issues with cutter bar performance or performance slowing down over the life of the machine. And a couple of the things that we've done to fix that, where we've upgraded this check valve on the drive motor here to a different, larger, more durable check valve. I believe most of the machines that I've been around in multiple territories have already had that upgrade, but if in doubt, get a hold of your CSA or your TM. The next thing is some machines out there have aluminum motor system on them here, and we are now using these cast motors that are higher efficiency and a little longer life on those. So if you'd like to upgrade those, that's another thing we can help you with. You're running the aluminum motors.
All right, the knockdown panel. So 2018 models and newer, we've come up with check valves that are installed in that center manifold, aluminum manifold on the platform to take care of keeping that knockdown bar from slowly creeping back. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. For the machines built prior to 2018, we do now have a kit. It's an inline manifold that we can put on the older machines to keep that knockdown bar from slowly creeping back on you. And then the last one.
Yeah, so the last one, in certain conditions, we've had complaints about the windrow blowing out from the engine fan. So you'll have a nice looking windrow when you're looking under it from here, and then back here it gets somewhat disturbed. So in order to remedy that, we have a couple of panels that we've had built. These panels are just located underneath here and can be easily installed to keep that engine fan from blowing the debris underneath.
All right, well, Aaron and I thank you all for bearing with us through this clinic. When we go live with you, obviously we'll be there. Hopefully both of us will be available online to talk to you live, to answer any questions if we've missed anything, or if you had any questions during this whole ordeal.
Yep, thank you very much. Looking forward to talking to all of you.
Okay, so we're going to bring back our panel and unmute everybody so that they can join us and take your questions. Guys, let me see if I can't get you unmuted there. And so, Carl, I see that we had a couple of questions come in. Did you want to start us off?
You bet. That was a bunch of information, guys. Thank you, Aaron and Shane. That was great. As you all know, there is a ton of information. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that windrower. It's a very highly productive windrower, and there's a lot of moving parts. But anyway, I see some questions coming in, so I'm going to direct the first one to Shane. Shane, when will I know what degree or pitch of knives to use in the different crops?
Well, that's a great question, Carl. So we've played around with it a little bit, and honestly, it seems to be conditions that determine whether you need to run the higher lift knives or not. A couple of years ago, we actually made it through the whole season on our demo unit in the heavier grasses and the lighter crops, all with the low lift knives, and it performed well. But in some seasons, even like last year, we had to run the higher lift knives because we just couldn't move those heavier crops like we needed to get through them. And you're going to notice this if you are running the low lift knives and you're in a fescue, perennial, orchard grass, and it's a struggle. You're struggling to maintain, 8 miles an hour, 9 miles an hour. You're definitely requiring more lift to get that crop moving. And that would be a definite indicator of when you need to be running the high lift knives.
Perfect. By all means, don't be afraid to change those knives, guys. They're relatively inexpensive. And if you see something that's not right and you want to switch to a high lift versus a low lift, by all means do that, because it can make a dramatic difference. Another question came in here. This one's for Aaron. Why is the power meter on the engine and cutter bar important that Shane talked about?
It's just important so you can gauge what you're doing with your machine versus your cutter bar to optimize crop flow and your speed and productivity. You want to be running up in the yellow on that engine bar, but on your cutter bars, you want to be running as low as possible so that you can flow the crop through there quickly, gently, and efficiently. That's the important part there.
Good. Anything you want to add there, Shane? Oh, you're muted.
When he said that you want the load bar to be low on the drums, so that means the crop is flowing through gently and very little contact and resistance.
Perfect. Very good. Here's another question. This one is going to go to Shane. Will too much down pressure on the header affect the way the machine cuts?
Absolutely. So if you don't have your float adjusted properly, which means that your float number is too low, that's the pressure that you're using on the cylinders to adjust your float. If that number's too low, you have too much weight on that platform and you're robbing horsepower just from the actual drag of that platform pushing it through that field. So that's why I mentioned that 120 to 150 pounds is generally where we try and set the float pressure. It doesn't mean that number you're reading in your float pressure, the pressure in the cylinder, is not the number indicating how much weight's on that platform. You physically need to feel that platform. After you run it enough, like I have, you can actually do it just by dropping your platform and recognizing how fast and hard it hits the ground if your float pressure is right. The right float pressure is when the platform will set solid on the ground, but not be dragging hard on the ground, right? And so you get a feel for that after you run it for a while, and it becomes second nature to you, to where you're not out there having to lift on the platform.
Sure, very good. Perennial ryegrass is probably one of the worst because of the honeydew, and it will build up on that bottom of the cutter bar if we have the pressure too tight. Plus, we're close to the ground, and being close to the ground, that dirt wants to build up too. So that header pressure is very, very important. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I want to add to that, Carl. I had a situation with a couple customers cutting meadow foam, which is a light, easy crop to cut, but the particular dirt they were in wanted to cake up on the bottom of that cutter bar and was causing problems. And by lightening up the float, the weight of that platform actually improved that condition.
It makes a big difference. Yes, it does. Here's another one for you, Shane. This customer's asking, does the air header need a side sickle to cut radish, turnips, or sugar beets?
It does not. We do have the sidewall of that platform is a crop divider. The earlier platforms up until 2 years ago did have a poor transition between the sidewall of that platform and the knockdown bar, to where crop, particularly turnips and radish, would hang up in that transition because we had a gap in there. We've now, for the last 2 years, the platforms we're building do not have that transition. It's a smooth transition that's totally filled in. And we now have pieces built that can be welded in to clean up that transition so you don't hang up those crops.
Yeah, ironically, this header is 16 foot, so the overall width is 16 foot 1 inch. And in those taller crops, that divider cuts that very well, and we don't waste hardly any. if you look behind a sickle bar machine like a Knockdown, it lays down about 12 inches of crop and pushes it down to the ground. On your next pass, you can't get that picked up and cut it. Where this air header, that knife blade is actually right to the edge of that cutter bar, and it will slice off those big tall crops like radish and turnips. It does a really, really nice job without wasting any crop. So that's very good.
Great point.
Yeah. Here's a question that came in from our guys up in the Columbia Basin. This one's for Will. Will, when I'm cutting my circle pivots, can I auto track when I'm cutting my circles with this windrower?
Yes, you can. Shouldn't be a real issue. I mean, it's just like, you know, you got your boundary set where, you know how big your field is, and then you start adjusting for your circle track from there.
Perfect. Will, can you elaborate on just doing a straight AB line with the windrower? We've had some great success with that.
Sure. Like most people down here in the South Valley, they do a couple round and round passes. Most of the time just manually drive, and then once they get to where, you know, they can comfortably maneuver the windrower into the next, going back and forth AB lines. It's just as simple as going into your display, hitting your set track feature, going in, grabbing your straight track, name your track wherever you want to name it, if you so choose to, and set your A, and then for ease of use and get you back to your main guidance page, just hit set B later. After you hit set B later, you know, drive your, you know, 20, 30 feet or however long you want to drive, and then hit your set B, and then it will make your proceeding lines throughout the field.
Great. When the W260 came out about 3 years ago, it was the first windrower, production windrower, that we could actually auto steer. And some of the results that we got were phenomenal, folks, because we can actually set that and we can cut 15 foot 9 inches. And every pass to pass is that same exact width. And with that said, that helps us feed the combine better because that windrower is uniform. I don't know of anybody that can drive a windrower and drive it perfectly straight with the steering wheel and keep it right on the exact width of the header. But when you're auto steering, we were able to do it, and some of those windrows, you could shoot an arrow down and they're so straight, and they're just perfect and uniform. And consequently, when we come to pick up those windrows with the combine, it feeds the combine absolutely beautiful. And we've got some great testimonials from customers on those kind of results. So,
yeah, I would just like to add too, for the customers up north, for the pivot, adaptive curve is a better option as well for those types of situations. You can drive it, and what it'll do is it'll just create proceeding pass off the way that you drove it the last round.
Perfect. Good. Excellent. Well, that's all the questions, Heidi, that we've got that have come in so far. I don't see any new ones coming in. So shall we wrap it up, or anybody else have any questions? If you do, by all means, type them in there so we can answer them the best that we can.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions right now. I do want to just say to our audience that our goal this evening was to provide information on how to set up your John Deere windrower for enhanced productivity this season. We hope you got that information. Our team is going to be open to questions now, during the season, and afterward. We have some tips that we'll be sending out before harvest season starts, so be on the lookout for those. Shane, did you want to add anything before we end?
Well, there's so one simple thing on the knife bolts. Some people don't realize, I mean, most people that change the knives realize that the bolt has got a hex shoulder on it, and there is a hex inside the disc that bolt fits into, so it can't pivot. But when you're swapping out knives, some guys will just slap the bolt up there and hit it with a gun, and can inadvertently, especially if there's grass buildup or honeydew, can pull that bolt in not indexed with that hex. If you look at the end of that bolt where the nut goes on, there's actually a line indented in the end of that bolt. If you just make sure that line is pointing straight out towards you, it will make sure it indexes that bolt every time you suck it up.
Yeah, and by all means, if you do mess one of those up, don't try to save it, just toss it and put another one on, because you'll fight it if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Aaron?
I think we pretty well covered it.
Okay. How about
Appreciate
you, Will? Sorry.
That's okay. I good to go. Y'all boys hit the nail on the head.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you guys. You know, with 23 full-service dealerships across Oregon, Washington, California, and Idaho, Papé is never far away from you. We look forward to you connecting with our knowledgeable and experienced team members for your equipment, parts, and service needs. And if we don't have any other questions, Carl, I think I'm going to let you say goodnight to the good folks.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you this harvest season. Again, it's coming up quick. I think within a few weeks here, we'll be cutting some of the turnips and the specialty crops. And once we get through the windrowing, the combine will be coming right after that. So tomorrow evening, I want to invite you to join us for the combine clinic. We're going to talk about the S780 combine. It's a machine that we have not had in the specialty grass seeds here in the Willamette Valley up until this year. So we've got some great information for you on the combine, and we'd love to have you join us tomorrow evening as well. And I want to thank the guys, Aaron and Shane and Will, and of course Heidi. She's done a great job putting all this together, and we sure appreciate it. And again, join us again tomorrow night. If you see on here, there's a registration email. I'm going to have Heidi talk about that real quick.
Thank you, Carl. So just real quickly, if you're not registered for tomorrow evening's combine event and or the Precision Ag event on Thursday night, you can hit this register key here on your screen or email eventsrsvp@pappy.com. That'll come directly to me. You can also use that email if you want to submit questions to our panelists and think about something after we end the show today. Okay, so with that, thank you, everybody, and we wish you a good night.
Thank you.